Welcome to CAM Matters, Condos, Co-ops, HOAs, and beyond. Betsy Barbieux is an informational leader in Florida on community association living, rights, and obligations. She is an expert on the rights and obligations of owners as well as the association. If you live or are planning to live in the state of Florida, there's a good chance you'll be part of a community association. And by the end of this show, you'll know a little bit more about community associations and why they matter.
Welcome to this episode of CAM Matters. I am your host, Suzanne Lynn with Betsy Barbieux. Betsy, we have got such a fun show today. We're going to be talking about voluntary compliance. When you first told me that, I'm like,
Sounds awful.
whoa, I'm not smart enough to deal with this. But then you started unraveling that it's just about good living in the world, and then how the micro size of that is community living. So let's jump in. Tell us first the broad 40,000-foot angle of what that means.
Sometimes I have time to think, and then my brain does little mind maps and goes everywhere with a thought. And I started thinking about this term voluntary compliance, which we say all the time in community association management. And we're expected that when we live in a community association, that whatever all the rules and restrictions and requirements and mandates are, that we will live with those, we will abide by those. And, it's like voluntary compliance. And then
Blah, blah, blah.
And I got to thinking about that. And I thought, well, you know what? Our whole society, world, through the centuries, depends on voluntary compliance.
Well, give me some examples.
Well, the first one that I thought of back whenever I started thinking about this was just driving. I depend on you to stop at the stop sign. I depend on you to stop at the traffic light. I depend on you to drive on that side of the road. And you depend on me to stop. And you depend on me to drive on that side of the road. So, just everything that we do in society is dependent on voluntary compliance. And through the centuries, different societies, different cultures, different nations even, they create their own laws. And the people who live in those societies agree to voluntarily comply. Now, we used to have kings and all those kinds of things that would demand compliance, but at least in our American society and Western society, we live in the countries that we live in, and we voluntarily comply to the laws. We, pay our taxes, we pay our mortgages, we have responsibilities that are expected of us in order to live in a safe, productive environment. And when we don't, that's when more laws are written, and then where punishment is imposed if you don't want to voluntarily comply. But it just occurred to me how much we depend on it just in driving to work.
Yeah. Well, that's so good. And I love the fact that you're using driving as an example, because driving specifically, we had to pass a test. We
Mhm.
signed. We signed legally that we're going to comply with the laws and
Mhm.
everything. But when it comes to community living, there's some things that are just kind of understood that aren't necessarily written down, that are really important, that have had to be lived by through thousands of years.
Mhm.
Like, don't steal. You didn't sign anything saying you weren't going to steal. Don't lie. I mean, it kind of sounds like we're bringing a little bit of Christian faith into this.
Well, and these are tenets. Some of the things are tenets of the Christian faith, but they've been around longer than 2,000 years. They're even in caveman days, you knew that you weren't supposed to steal somebody else's um, stone sofa. Uh, You knew you weren't supposed to steal something that belonged to somebody else. You knew you weren't supposed to drag some other man's husband's wife off by her hair and, take her to your cave. You knew that you weren't supposed to do those things. We know in society that lying is wrong. We know that cheating is wrong.
Right.
And even where my husband Jim works as the chaplain at the Lake County Jail, there's a moral code among the inmates. They
Like it's understood just between them?
yeah, they know that they know that stealing each other's food is wrong.
Okay.
They know that taking each other's few possessions that they have is wrong. They know that lying about each other is wrong. They still have a moral code even in jail.
Wow.
They also have
That's
an
cool.
incredible contempt and disdain and revulsion for child predators.
Mhm. Mhm.
And those inmates have to be separated from the rest of the population.
Wow.
So
Well,
so there are things that we are I don't know whether you call it a moral code, but there is a moral code that we voluntarily comply, and when you don't, society falls apart.
hmm.
Whether you're talking on a national level or whether
Mhm.
you're talking in a community association.
What do you see happens when that code is not followed? When there's a breakdown of voluntary compliance in specifically community living, what does that look like?
In community association living, it's anger.
Hmm.
And and what I see is so many people don't know what the code is. Because not only do we have the moral code that's just kind of innate, but there are things like don't park on the grass, uh,
Oh. Mm,
pick up the dog poo,
right.
uh, don't take 14 children to the pool who aren't yours.
Wow.
Don't give people the code to the gate that
Mm,
aren't residents.
mm.
Don't park 5 cars in the driveway.
Betsy, these are such amazing
Don't
examples.
don't play loud noise.
Right.
Be respectful of your neighbors.
Oh,
And it seems so easy to do,
yeah.
but when you don't, then our community associations have to enforce and make you do what you're supposed to do, which is ironic because you already pre-agreed to do it. When you
Did we
sign
read the small print when we first moved in, though? Really? Did we?
when you signed your closing documents, you agreed to voluntarily comply,
Yeah.
and and then you don't.
And then you don't, and then that's when it breaks loose.
Mhm.
And before you know it, laws are having to be instituted and rules that, you
Right.
can't
We
fly
have to,
certain flags and you
you
can,
know,
it sometimes I think those rules can be taken to the extreme, but there's probably a good reason behind it. Somebody probably
right?
didn't voluntarily comply,
Somebody was
close out on the clothesline or something.
yeah, somebody was extremely non-compliant.
Right.
Like in some of the laws that have come out in the last several years, especially after the collapse of the Champlain Towers, you know, the I guess moral code there was take care of your stuff.
Yeah.
And successive boards and owners voted not to take care of their stuff.
Wow.
And buildings fall down when you don't do that,
Yeah.
if you don't take care of your stuff.
So this is more than just how we're acting and living as being good neighbors. This is about, making sure buildings don't fall down and maybe it means voting on a rate increase so that there's more funds in the coffer and you can take care of those things that have to be that's a form of voluntary compliance, doing the right thing. Taking
Doing
care
the
of
right thing would be paying enough to make things uh, safe and to maintain them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Great examples. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back on the other side of this here at Cam Matters.
Okay. Are you ready for a new career? Do you have skills or interest in management, real estate, construction, maintenance, accounting, strategic planning, project management, budgets, human resource management, lawn and landscaping, pool services, or any other expertise needed to operate a community association? If you do, community association management could be for you. For more information, feel free to email Betsy at betsy@floridacamschools.com or visit the Florida Cam Schools website at www.floridacamschools.com. Florida Community Association Management continues to grow. Career opportunities abound.
Welcome back to CAM Matters. We're talking today about voluntary compliance and how it really applies to not just community association living, but really just like being a good person living in the world, right, Betsy?
Right, right. If you think about it, voluntary compliance is the way our society works. I depend on you to do that, and you depend on me to do this. And then when you put that into a smaller context, like community associations, um, it it's I don't know what would the word be. It's more obvious when you don't voluntarily comply.
Mm-hmm.
When you're around hundreds or even thousands of people during the day out on the highway and in workplaces and recreation places, you could be around hundreds of people during the day, and you don't necessarily notice when people don't voluntarily comply. But in a smaller setting like a community association, you do. You
Yeah.
do know the people who park in the grass. You do know the people who don't pick up the dog poo. And
Mm.
and you do know the people who let too many kids come to the pool unsupervised.
Right.
And you begin to get angry, and because you think, "Well, I'm voluntarily complying and they're not, so why should I?" And then you end up with a group of people who are that the others are angry at, and
Sure.
so you end up with factions.
Yeah. That's the one that brings the oversized rafts to the pool
Yeah.
every day when it's the busiest time ever. So what I'm hearing, it's interesting because there's some voluntary compliance that we agree to, that we've signed our name to, that we understand and will abide by. But then there's some that's just common sense. Like
Mhm.
you don't let the dog run around without a leash. You might not have had to sign about that, but it's just understood.
You don't. Well, in most counties, it's a law. So,
Okay. Okay. That
but
example.
but you don't let your dog run around without a leash.
Right. Right.
Period. You just don't.
Yeah. How do we wrap this voluntary compliance up in a nutshell?
Well, I think some of it is, well, maybe more than some, is education. First of all, boards need to know that their job is to monitor voluntary compliance and to make sure that it's done.
Mm.
And I was talking to a group. I did a private board certification training last weekend, and one gentleman, one board member said, "But I don't want to tell my neighbor. I don't want to send him a letter. It's my neighbor." And and as hard as it is, this is business. It's not personal.
Mm.
And if you let one person not comply, then why should then their neighbor and their neighbor and their neighbor? And it just breeds contempt. So I think education, first of all, in what a board's responsibility really is, which is to protect the property and its value, maintain
Mhm.
the things that are used in common, and enforce the restrictions on the owner's use rights of
Mhm.
their property and the common property. So I think education is a piece of that. Uh, Owners need to know what their responsibility and their role is, and boards need to know what they're supposed to be doing.
Mm.
The other thing is, which kind of goes back to that moral code thing that we were talking about,
Yes.
be
Yeah.
a good example. If you're a board
Oh,
member,
correct. Yeah.
you should not be the one who is having
Needs to be
letters
talked
sent
to.
to you. You
Right.
if
Right.
you're especially if you're a board in the board or on a leadership position or the spouse or family member of a board member, you need to set the example. Good
Yeah.
grief,
Yeah.
honestly.
This isn't a place for you to have more wiggle room. This is where you're setting the example. The other thing that comes to mind, and it's so hard because I know that, board members are voluntary positions, but having people in the right seats, having someone who is able to step up, who needs to send the letters out, in the role as whoever would send them out, having the president as the personality. We've talked about that before, having the right personalities in the right seats so that people can follow through because it is hard if you get somebody who's an introvert and needs to be the one with the I don't want to say reprimanding, but you didn't you
That'd
didn't go to the
be the
you
one
didn't do this right. Yeah, have people in the right
that
seats.
they need to be the parent.
Yeah, yeah,
Need to be the parent and be able to say, "Not supposed to be doing this."
it's not
But the other
personal.
but the other thing too, and there are a lot of communities that can't afford management on any kind of level, whether it's minimal or a lot. But if you can afford some management, your manager will send those letters for you.
Okay,
And that's part of what management does is we kind of we're the gatekeepers. We stand in
right,
between the people
right,
and
right.
and
Wasn't
the
me.
board.
It wasn't your
No,
manager.
where the
No, I'm just
manager sent the letter, not the board. The manager
right,
sent the letter.
right.
Blame it on me.
Sure.
But then for those communities that are too small and can't have any kind of professional management, then board members have to step up. And for some of them, uh, especially if they're doing their own bookkeeping and everything, which I would never recommend, the uh, time involvement is huge. You think there's not much to do, but just go ahead and be an officer on the board of directors and find out how much there is not to do.
Yeah, just do the right thing, but voluntarily comply, make it easy for both the board and for you. Betsy, we've got, August coming up in a few months.
Yes.
Your Yes conference
Yes.
is I always love leading up to it, but you've still got sponsorship opportunities
I
and you
do.
want
I
to
do.
bring that awareness that you can still sign up.
I do. I have lunch sponsorships still available and breakfast sponsorships.
Okay.
And I think let's see, I've got the social sponsorship covered. That will be Connie Lorenz, Asphalt Restoration Technology. And I have the gold sponsorship covered. That will be Hot Wire Fusion. And I have our always faithful platinum event sponsor is Vice Painting. So
Nice.
I've got those three, but lunch and breakfast are still open as well as educational materials is still open.
Each month we talk, those sponsorship spots are getting less and less.
Yeah.
So seriously, if you're interested, don't wait because next month it's going to be, well, we're down to one. You're
Yeah.
not going to have
Yeah.
much of a choice, which is
And
exciting. That
I
shows the
also,
support.
for the
Yeah.
media, the Florida Journal magazine
Yeah.
is the media
Mm.
sponsor.
Nice.
So we always appreciate them. It will be in Leesburg on Thursday and Friday, August 14th and 15th, 2025. And I'm planning my lineup. I'm probably going to have a couple of panel discussions about the state of the industry and where we are after all of these new laws and after the disasters of the last 2 years,
My
um,
goodness.
how that has played out. And then we'll have another day of probably what I'm looking at is going back to some CAM basics. I think a lot of people have forgotten what they learned. So I think we might be going back to some CAM basics.
Okay. Very good, Betsy. It's always a joy. I always look forward to as a highlight of my month to be able to chat with you. And please, if you're consuming these videos, please like, respond, um, give a grade to it, give a thumbs up. Betsy spends a lot of time and effort into these shows for education and for connecting and networking. So thank you so much. It's another episode of CAM Matters. We'll see you next month.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to CAM Matters. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. For more information, feel free to email Betsy at betsy@floridacamschools.com or visit the Florida Cam Schools website at www.floridacamschools.com. Information provided on this show is general in nature and does not constitute legal advice. Please contact a licensed attorney for your specific situation.